Life as a foreigner? Whew, that's quite an undertaking. Hey, what's up? I'm Rafael Di Furia, aka Rafi D is me, and I am back at it again on another beautiful Friday night. In the past, we have spoken about being an expat, being a foreigner, being an American in Italy, coming from a faraway land to make a new life for yourself in this amazing country. I get a lot of different questions about living in Italy and different aspects of living in Italy. How different is this? Or how similar is this? Or can I do this? Or can I do that? And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. But before we get too much deeper into the video, if you would like to see more content like this about moving to Italy, Italian citizenship, and more, please be sure to subscribe with that notification bell turned on, and if you could also give this video a like, I would really appreciate it. And also for those of you who are interested in the Pizza Pasta Amore shirts and the other shirts that are available, and I've also added a new shirt, Strict Pizzatarian. These are all still available, and as of the release of this video, it's still not too late to make your order if you're looking for something extra for Christmas. When we're talking about living abroad, we're not talking about just the people who go and live abroad, but we're also talking about the people that live in these areas where you're going to be, locals from there, and their opinions about a lot of these things may differ from your own. Points of view change, mentalities change, and one is not better than the other. They're just simply different. And when we're specifically talking about Italy, like I've mentioned in the past, the mentality towards moving is a bit different. In general, it's more normal for Italians to stay in one area rather than moving every few years, which is not necessarily so far from the norm in the States. Even for people moving just within the same city, it's not necessarily the most unusual to go to a different apartment every year, 2 years, 3 years. While yes, there are many people who stay in the same house for their whole lives, in my own experience personally, and from what I've seen, Americans are much more mobile in that way, but very often staying within the country, but now more Americans are starting to leave the country. But then to expand to moving internationally, this is something where there will be a difference of mentality between Americans abroad and Americans in America. Many people have a very difficult time relating to moving abroad. Questions like, why would you do it? How come you did it? How did you get the guts to do it? Is it really all it's cracked up to be? Oh, it must be so glamorous and luxurious. There are a lot of misconceptions, without a doubt, but I find that maybe in Italy, that people from here have maybe a little bit more difficult time relating to wanting to come to Italy when a lot of Italians, especially young Italians, are wanting to leave the country. While Italians may be less likely to move around within the country quite often, it seems as though maybe they're more likely to move internationally, at least within Europe. But just as an example, look at how many Italian Americans there are. That's a huge amount of Italians who left the country. But then if even we talk about the Italian Brazilian community, that's a huge community. Gigantic. So making some of these larger moves may not necessarily be so far out of the norm. In the US, for example, that type of international move may not be the most common thing that you hear about. I feel like here everybody knows somebody or has a cousin or knows somebody who's gone to another country. It's like, oh yeah, my cousin, he moved to England. My cousin, oh, he moved to Germany. Oh yeah, I lived in Germany for 3 years. Oh, I've been here, I've been there. And you hear about that a lot. Whereas I feel with Americans, it's far less common. While yes, there are Americans that live abroad, without a doubt, in a very large amount. Maybe when we're talking about percentages, there are probably fewer Americans than Italians. And then there are some smaller differences that do end up making a difference. Like for example, right now it's the holiday season. Christmas time is coming up, winter is here, and the cheer is in the air. But in northern Italy, I can't necessarily speak about southern Italy, but I would have a feeling this might be similar in this way, is that they don't go all out and over decorate like they do in America. Like when you're in the States, everything is not just decorated, but it's over decorated. There are decorations, and yes, you do see them, but they're a lot more, I guess you could say, conservative in a way about that. I mean, in America, things sometimes are a bit too big and flashy, and Italy is very often the opposite of that. That's one thing that I also think is really nice, though, about Italy, is that it's not too in your face. You don't get really too fed up with it. Okay, maybe you get a little bit by the end of December, but maybe it's less overwhelming. But then there are also differences when you're growing up in the media that we consume, in the pop culture that we are aware of. I mean, I remember very clearly being a child watching Sesame Street and all of the different, I guess, propaganda you could call it about don't waste water, recycle, look both ways before you cross the street, like these sorts of things. Or even in school, they had initiatives like Dare to do drugs or MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I'm not saying that these things don't exist in Italy, but it for sure does make an influence on people when they're older. I mean, for example, even just smoking. From what I've seen, it seems as though that Italians smoke a lot more than people in the States. It's much more common when you're walking through the streets to just see people smoking. Personally, I'm not a smoker, but I've learned to really not care. So if I'm out at like a cafe or something and people start smoking, it doesn't bother me. I mean, okay, I may not be crazy about the smell, but it's just more accepted here. Or another part of the difference in the lifestyle is just getting around. In America, everything is just so big and widespread in the cities and the towns, and it's just normal. You hop in the car and go. Or even some people owning multiple vehicles and parking them just in their private garage in their standalone home. Whereas in Italy, this isn't necessarily so normal. You don't find like these big pickup trucks like you find in the States, like what is it, a Dodge Ram. It's got something like 4 wheels on the back axle. This is just almost unheard of. I'm not saying that large vehicles don't exist here. It's just that there are a lot fewer of them. And in many places, people just don't own cars. I mean, even where I live, it is a city where it's possible to drive, but of course, like a lot of places in Italy, there are pedestrian-only zones, and I happen to live close enough to the center of the town where I live that I can just go and walk, and that's not abnormal in Italy. A lot of people do everything that they need with walking and public transportation. But then going back to spaces, and specifically living spaces, in general, apartments and homes in Italy are a bit smaller. So that also ends up reflecting in other parts of the lifestyle here. You might find in America that it's a lot of people's goals to have an entertainment room with a pool table. Some people even have a small private home cinema, a game room, a playroom. So many different extra types of rooms that don't involve sleeping or eating. And I'm not saying these things don't exist in Italy, it's just far less common, especially because apartments are generally much smaller. That means that people often spend a lot more time out of the house. So that means maybe the local coffee bar where you just go and sip your coffee and walk off kind of becomes like your living room. That's where you go meet, where you maybe go in the morning on your way to work just to have a quick cup of coffee, or maybe on the weekend where you go and meet a friend. Or even the very popular tradition of the passeggiata, going out in the evening for a walk, meeting with friends, bumping into people on the streets, grabbing a bite to eat, having a little drink, especially in summer when things are a bit hotter and air conditioning isn't necessarily the most common thing here either. It is something that you can find, but I would still say it's not quite as popular as it is in the States. And because a lot of the buildings here are older, central air and central heating just don't exist. But also when we're talking about space inside of your apartment, that means what is it practical to have and what's too much. It could be a little bit easier here to overcrowd yourself in a much smaller space. And a lot of apartments don't even have a closet. I mean, you'll have to add one in, like a standalone kind of unit. I mean, there are plenty of apartments that do have built-in closets, but not everywhere. So it's something you have to think about maybe adding after. And so if you have one of these standalone closets in your room, that means you're going to maybe be a bit limited on what you're able to keep in there. And so also having a smaller selection of clothing, your wardrobe might actually be a little bit easier. And it could be worth to maybe spend a little bit extra on some higher quality items than it would be to go and just get like a bunch of t-shirts and a bunch of cheap things and stuff your closet with that. But here in Italy, just like everywhere else, both options exist. You can get some higher quality items, or you can get stuff that will fall apart like cardboard after the first use. So if we're talking about Italy, what might be normal for people from here might not be normal for you where you're coming from. There will be things that are similar, but there are some adjustments that come with that. And it's not just for you, but also the people around you. And some people may be less comfortable with that. Like in America, basically everybody is from someplace, whether you're first, second, third generation, fourth generation. And while yes, there are a lot of immigrants in Italy, and while Italy does have a longer history of different peoples coming to the nation, I'm just saying that as a foreigner, it might be easier to integrate into life in the US than it might be in Italy. Wherever you go though, being a foreigner, it's not the easiest to integrate into the everyday local life. And this can often come down to language. So if you're spending time with people, I mean, it's nice to be able to communicate with them. So this is also why I say learn the language, because it will help you to be able to integrate here more, get work here, and to really come in contact and learn more about the differences and learn how to live with them and accept them and adjust to them, because there is an adjustment that does need to happen almost no matter where you're coming from. I mean, even for people moving within Italy, people who come from the south to the north to the south, there are differences in the lifestyles. But coming as an American or a foreigner of any kind, there are going to be even more differences. These are all just things to think about. And if you would like to see more content like this about moving to Italy, Italian citizenship, and more, please be sure to subscribe with that notification bell turned on. And if you could also give this video a like, I would really appreciate it, as it does help out the channel. And if you would like to help make more videos like this possible, please consider becoming a monthly patron over on Patreon. You can go to rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon. Or if you would like to just help out one time, you can go to rafaeldifuria.com/support. Or there are also shirts that are still available, and as of the release of this video, there is still time to order it in time for Christmas. The items are shipped from the US and Europe, so if you're in one of these places, you should be covered. Don't forget to check out the new design that I just put out a few days ago. And as always, I'm Rafael Di Furia, aka Rafi D is me. Thank you for coming to join me on another beautiful Friday night. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all next Friday. Later.